Hi and welcome to Mind 123. I'm Chantal and I'm here today with Shiiké Vanderwerff. Welcome along, Shiiké.
Thank you, Chantal.
Great to have you here. Now we're talking today about red hot relationships. Now, in that context, are we talking about the relationship with our husband, our wife, our partner?
It's a great topic for conversation, isn't it? Because it sounds like we're talking about intimacy and how to rock things in the bedroom. And, you know, fortunately, unfortunately, not all our important relationships end up there. The red hot relationships that we're going to talk about today are any communication, anyone you communicate with that you would like to go a little deeper with, that you would like to have an influence with, that you can strengthen or deepen or make that relationship a little richer.
Okay.
That's the red hot we're talking about.
Okay, so where do we start with enriching that relationship?
It's always starts with ourselves. And I'll give you an example. Say I was talking about my partner or a colleague or my children. If I wanted to improve that relationship, you might think that, well, don't they need to be here to talk with me? Because clearly, if they change their way of behaving, it makes my job a lot easier in that relationship. And yet, that's not something we can do. Red hot relationships at its core is very much about one person being able to influence that communication or that relationship. And I'm sure, like me, you've seen the reality shows where Dancing with the Stars or the like.
I have.
You get one excellent dancer and you get one, you know, famous nuffer who's got two left feet.
Yeah.
And yet they look fantastic together because one person leads that dance. And communication skills are very much similar in that if one person has an intention and has an ability, they can have a huge influence on making that relationship so much more productive.
Okay, so talk us through some of those communication skills that we could be improving on for those relationships.
If you think about in your own life and in any context, what makes somebody great about making that relationship work? Somebody who's influenced you, or maybe your best friend where you just feel so open and natural and supported in that relationship. The number one thing that usually it ends up coming down to is this idea of openness, where you're not feeling judged and you completely trust in that honesty the person that's in front of you. If trust is the foundation of any great communication or any worthwhile communication, the one tool that we can use to develop that and help unlock that is empathy. Learning to understand how somebody else prefers to communicate. Because if you're like me, you were brought up in saying, you know, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. Well, that simply means that everybody likes to communicate the way I do, which simply misses the point. And it might seem counterintuitive at first, but if I communicate in a style that you prefer, clearly that relationship will create a bit more rapport, a bit more empathy, and as a result become a little bit more open and honest. So I would start with empathy.
Empathy is number one.
Empathy is number one. Number two, and this is particularly relevant for any of the parents out there, positive reinforcement. Now, we know that, and we've got a dog that loves a pat better than a scolding. Of course there is, but there's some really interesting work by an American psychologist called Shelley Gable. She's easy to research. And she's developed this a wonderful, simple little model where active, constructive communication has a huge impact on moving a relationship into a mutually beneficial place. And when we say the words active and constructive, so active, you really do participate, and constructive, you aim to build up. Now, this is different in different contexts, but if you are listening well to the person that's in front of you, how you engage, you can engage actively and you can engage to constructively promote what they're going through. And to do that, you'll be amazed at how ready people are to engage with you.
Excellent.
So we've got the trust and then we've got positive reinforcement, which are two nuggets that I'm sure everybody really knows about.
Yep, absolutely. Is there a third part?
Always.
Always a third. What's number three?
This is the one that seems a little counterintuitive because this is in fact not about what I can do and how do I engage with the other person. This is in fact knowing where are my boundaries, what's negotiable and what's not negotiable in this relationship. That's really important. And again, in the parental context, who's the parent in that relationship, that's pretty important to remember. But then it also extends to colleagues and it extends to partners. What is negotiable and what's not negotiable? So what's really important for me? Now, it's clear that in some relationships, boundaries can be like open lawn between two people. Whereas in other relationships, you need walls, like you need the Berlin Wall to create a safe environment for that. So what's acceptable language, what's acceptable behaviour, and what to be clear with yourself. I was working with a lady recently and she had authored books, she'd worked all around the world, and yet she was up to her 4th marriage. And it was something that she was not seeing in herself. She knew that she was the person to be able to influence a relationship, but in her mind, she always chose the wrong person.
Right.
And my question to her was, well, what does the right person look like?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, sure, I can come across wonderful one day and I can be terrible the next. When she really understood that she needed to be very clear what was acceptable for her in that relationship, that was when she started to change, not is somebody right for me or wrong for me, but do I know what's important for myself, and that's what I bring to the relationship. And it's a game changer. It seems a little counterintuitive at first, but it really is probably the highest impact because it affects you at a really ground level.
Do you think, Shiiké, that you could put that into the context of, say, a parent-teenager relationship, or an example that you may have come across similar to that, where they may have changed their behaviours or taken on board this empathy and the trust that you talk about to change their behaviour for the best?
Absolutely. The biggest and hardest hurdle to overcome as a parent myself, 3 children, has always been, falling into that default of I'll tell you what to do. So my kid's got a problem and I'll write a prescription for that. And when my son came from quite a small primary school and went to quite a large high school, my wife and I were very concerned with how he'd make that adjustment. And at the end of the first term, he did come home and he felt that he'd run in with a teacher and his world hadn't fallen apart, but it had caused him a lot of stress because he felt very marginalised and felt like there was quite an injustice there. Now, as a parent, my first approach, Parenting 101, hey, I know what you're going through. I was in Year 8 once too. In fact, I can remember a run-in with a teacher very similar to that, and if you just try A, B and C, you'll probably find that now A, B and C may well be an effective way for him to deal with what's in front of him. But when did he turn off? As soon as he heard me say, I was in Year 8 once, he's just gone, here goes Dad again. And as somebody's child, you probably think that when I was in Year 8, there were horses and carts. And there weren't any mobiles or iPhones. And as my first, I didn't validate his experience. There was no empathy. I wasn't trying to put myself anywhere near his shoes to the best of my ability. So it's not when I say I understand you that's what matters. It's when he says, Dad, you understand me.
Yeah, makes a big difference, doesn't it? I want to say thank you, Shiiké, so much, because it's fantastic to hear about it in the context of the relationship, of the parent-child relationship as well. And I think we definitely have learnt a lot of great techniques and things to keep in mind when we are trying to build those red-hot relationships. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. And just to reinforce, the influence that one person can have in any dynamic is the real gift here.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.